What you were just watching was a little bit of an interview from a former guest. His name is Ulysses Slaughter. This was a very powerful and moving interview the very first time that we had Ulysses on, so we're going to let him tell the story of his life and reconciliation and forgiveness. Ulysses, thank you very much for coming back on the program. It's so nice to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be here. You know, it's interesting that 5 years.
I know.
5 years have gone by since I was sitting in this spot.
It has been a long time.
And it just seems like yesterday.
I agree. And thank you very much for this. We'll get to this. We can talk about this a bit later. But it has been 5 years, so let's talk a little bit about your story and what happened.
So when I first came here back in January 2012, January 2012, I was waiting for my father to arrive in Philadelphia because my father was coming to do a stage presentation with me called Forgiving Our Fathers, Forgiving Ourselves. So this presentation was about the reconciliation of me and my father some 33 years after my father killed my mother in Chicago. I was 12 years old, 1978, June 25th, 1978. I was in the house when I heard 2 gunshots go off. Woke up, found my mother laying in the floor, my father standing over her, apologizing. For 33 years, we were estranged. We went a very long time trying to be father, son, trying to make something of just an incredibly devastating situation. And as it turned out, 20 years went by before I saw my father, from 1990 to December the 19th, 2010. I remember the exact date I walked up to my father's house thinking that I was going to do harm to him.
Yeah, I wanted you to get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
The moment in the car. And
yeah.
Tell me about that moment in the car. Tell me about what you were thinking.
So back in 2010, October 2010, I used to do domestic violence workshops. And people would always ask me about my father and how long he spent in prison. And I didn't know. I had no clue. So I decided I was going to investigate. I went back to the Circuit Court of Cook County, which is where Chicago is located. And they gave me the documents. They handed me a box full of documents. I had no idea that these documents even existed. And I'm flipping through pages of these documents, and I became so angry. Now, this is 32 years later.
And just to put, not to interrupt you, but to put a point on it, you had your own sons by this point,
Absolutely.
right?
I had 6 children by this time. So I had been away from my father for 20 years. And in that period of time, of 20 years, I had 6 children. My youngest of which was born 2 days after my mother's birthday, which was another, cosmic indicator for me.
Right.
And so I went to my father's house on December the 19th after looking at these documents. And I had been to his house before. I am not proud to say I used to stalk my father. I used to go to my father's house when I was in Chicago. I would stand outside of his house. I would wait for him. The book that I wrote before this book was called Dear Daddy, I Hate You.
I remember that.
Letters to my mother's killer. So I went to his house, and there he was, standing in this spot. And as far as I was concerned, that was a cosmic sign that I was supposed to kill my father. And my father approached me, walked up to me, and just this kind of thing came over me. I don't even know how to describe it. This thing came over me. I just got washed with something. And I was so overwhelmed that I just got in the car and I drove away. And as it turned out, I called him about 2 weeks later. I wrote him a letter, actually, and I told him if we were going to have any chance at reconciliation, that he was going to have to tell me what happened to my mother. We went through this thing for about, 20 minutes. We're arguing on the phone. And I told him finally, look, if we're going to have a shot at reconciliation, you're going to have to start doing domestic violence workshops with me. He said yes. I didn't believe him. I just could not believe that he was going to do that. And so I started calling all these people, writing all these letters. I wrote a letter to the Dr. Phil Show. The Dr. Phil Show says, yes, we'd love to have you and your father on. We wound up on the Dr. Phil Show on January the 19th, 2011. I still had not truly reconnected with my father, so I drove back on June 25th, 2011, 33 days to the date, 33 years to the date of my mother's death. Got in a car with my father, went to the cemetery with my father. I had no idea he had never been to my mother's gravesite. So I'm driving, just no clue, until we were maybe about I don't know, maybe 5 miles from the cemetery. I had no idea. And I couldn't believe that I was doing this. I just felt like an entirely different person. So we got out. My father walked to the gravesite, and it was the first time that my mother, my father, and I had been together in any measure.
Since that night?
Since that night, yep.
So what was your father's reaction at your mother's grave?
He had what I would call a breakdown. I mean, he had never been, I think it was just this, because he had never been there, it was just the reality that he was in this space where a woman's body was laying.
Because of him? Because of
him. And that he was there with me, his son, that I had walked him back to that place. Words tough to describe, because I'm standing there. I remember standing there thinking to myself, am I really doing this? Is this really happening? And yeah, it was really happening. Me and my father were there.
So Ulysses, was your sister in the house that night?
No, she wasn't.
No, okay.
My older sister was not in the house, and she punished herself for a long time thinking that she should have been in the house when it happened. So it was just me and my younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know you said there was a gap in between the time from when he murdered your mother and you got to see him again. And it looks like from you writing these books, you have a family. I assume you're raising your kids the correct way and everything's working out well. So it looks like the Lord directed you, took a tragedy and directed you to something positive. But during that gap of you not seeing your father, did you have to go to therapy, or what was it there? Because something had to give you a jump start, to me, to get to the next step to start to move on.
You know, there were so many things that happened, and part of what happened is why I wrote this book. People often ask me about what was going on for me in those times. You figure I'm 12 years old when my father killed my mother. And the fall that I started 7th grade, I wound up going to a Catholic school. I had never gone to a Catholic school in my life. And right away, I'm being taught about reconciliation. I had never heard the word in my life. So I'm a 7th grader, 12 years old, and I'm being introduced to reconciliation. No sense at all that this would have a purpose for me in the future. So I'm being seeded in a way with all kinds of stories, all kinds of songs, all kinds of relationships. I remember trying therapy. I was I was turned off by therapy. I didn't like it. I didn't like sitting there talking to someone, asking me questions. So there was never any formal, long-term formal therapy. What there was, though, were these constant messages that were coming to me in the form of songs, writings, and again, interactions that I had with people who indirectly talked with me about forgiveness. So if that was therapy in any way, that was my therapy.
Now, as these songs and writing, is that how you took up writing? Because I don't know if it just came to you and like, I want to write a book, or how it led up to you writing a book?
This book is a long time. I mean, this book is literally, 35 years in making. So I conceived of this book in 2014. But the point around these songs is I remember before my mother passed even, Stevie Wonder has this song called As. And I used to sing this song all the time. And there are these parts in the song. There's one part in particular where he says, "We all know sometimes life's hates and troubles."
About to sing it, or
I'm always right there, man. But he says, "We all know sometimes life's hates and troubles can make you wish you were born in another time and space, and you can bet your life in that and twice as double that God knew exactly where He wanted you to be placed." That used to irritate me. I couldn't even listen to Stevie Wonder after my mother passed. Anytime I would hear a Stevie Wonder song, I would just turn it off. So it was songs like that, it was Gil Scott-Heron, it was all these things.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I was hearing these messages. I was reading Malcolm X, I was looking at MLK, I was looking at everybody from, Marvin Gaye. All these people had these things that they were saying, and I would remember these things, but they didn't mean anything to me. And suddenly there was this kind of opening, and it was like, wow, these things that I remember are the things that have actually been inoculating me. This has been my preparation. This stuff wasn't random. And so when I started putting it all together, it was like, you know what? These have been my lessons. These are the things that got me. These are the things that held me. Christ said, how many times do you forgive? 7 times
Right.
7?
Right.
7 times 70? Wow. I was getting it. I didn't know I was getting it, but I got it.
Now, I noticed that when you were talking, Aubin had started to play a little bit of the Dr. Phil clip. If we have it queued up to the Dr. Phil clip, can we play that? While they're preparing that, I was looking, I opened the book, Ulysses, and it was like page 20, because actually Dwayne asked me, Dwayne said to me, what do you want me to do for you, me, if I break down again like I did in the first interview?
Right.
And I'm like, no, I think I'll be okay. I think I'll be all right. Then I got to page 20, and in quotes in this box, my father and I watched as my mother's breathing slowed. Her spirit vanished, and she slowly slipped through death's mysterious door. That's too much.
Yeah. I always find it interesting how I can sit and I can be philosophical and I can be theoretical. I can be all these things in a moment like this. And when I go back to that moment and I remember standing there watching, and you want to go. You want to actually go too, You want to,
Yes,
you
I know.
you want to, it's
You're
like,
done. You're done here.
Wait,
I'm
wait
done
for
here.
me. I'm
Yes.
coming too. And it's just, it's no way to know. It's no way to figure out, how can I follow you? And so, wow. I still sometimes want to go. I just want to tell me what it is. Somebody tell me what that's all about. But I believe that there's something for me to do here in this work of forgiving and reconciliation. I believe that there's a lot of work for us to do around forgiveness. I believe it is the thing that gives us the reset in life. It's the thing that, for us as individuals, for us as families, in our relationships, in our community, it's the ultimate reset. And it's one that we need to embrace in a big way. I never thought, nowhere in the world could you tell me that I was going to forgive my father. Right. No way. People used to say that to me, you got to forgive your father. And as I told you when I first met you, no, I don't. Nobody has to do anything. We have a choice. But with the choice of forgiveness comes some profound liberation, profound freedom, profound reconnection to God.
I was watching something the other day, and I want to show the Dr. Phil clip, but the thing I heard was somebody said that in order to hold on to anger and hostility, it's an effort. You have to make an effort to do it every minute of every day.
You do.
And then once you forgive, that's it. The work is done.
You do. And I think it's interesting because I had to ask myself, okay, now what am I going to do?
Right.
And what the answer was I'd love to help people learn to let go, because now what I experience is an entirely different way of living. It's an entirely different thing. And I become a better person for my children. I become a better father for my children. I become a better friend for people because I can let that go, because that's a lot to hold.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you told your children about their grandfather?
Oh, yeah.
Or how do you...
My father came to visit them, so there wasn't a whole lot to tell. He actually walked through the door 2 months before my father passed away. He flew here for that presentation. Mm-hmm. Little did I know, Dwayne, that my father only had so much time to live. So when he got off that plane in February 2012, for the very first time, and he met my children, his grandchildren, he left on March the 7th of 2012 and passed away May the 14th. So they got a chance to meet him. They've got pictures with him. They've got video of their grandfather. And they've seen me go through these phases. And they know that their father, that I am a different man because of my relationship with my father.
I hope we have enough time. We're going to go ahead and play the Dr. Phil clip, and I think that we'll be able to come back after this, but I want you guys to stay tuned. We'll try and close after the Dr. Phil clip. We'll be right back.